This has been my studio for the last few months. I've actually been here the longest time out of all the other places, and I'm leaving soon, so I wanted to just film some more stuff while I was here. And I've been traveling for 3 years now. I wanted to share some of the things that I learned. So, when I first started this, it was in maybe February of 2022, and I went to Bali. And Bali at that time was still under COVID rules, so you had a quarantine. So out of all the hotels that you get a quarantine at, there was only like eight, and they're all five-star hotels, and it was like 80 to 100 something a night or higher. I chose the cheapest one, obviously. So I stayed there for a few nights, quarantined at that hotel, and then that started my whole trip in Asia. And at that time, I remember thinking, oh, this is so crazy. I'm in Asia. I'm in Bali, which at the time was my dream place to go. And it was funny to think about because I had just stayed in Hawaii before, and which now looking back, I think the island of Maui has more things to offer than what Bali has for me personally. Because, of course, Bali as an island has many different things to do for different people and different perspectives and priorities. So I'm not bashing on Bali. It's an amazing place, and I got two custom surfboards there, and it really set my Asia trip. So I stayed in Bali for a few months, and then I went to Vietnam. And then after I stayed in those two places, I was like, hey, I kind of like Asia. It's the first time that I felt like I personally fit in a place that has a lot of Asians. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'll be a non-minority. So I stayed in Bali, and in that time it was when NFTs and crypto and all that was booming. So I was like, okay, hey, let's try and make a career out of crypto. So I rode that as much as I could, which wasn't too crazy. I think I made maybe between like 2 to 5 thousand actually. So I didn't really make that much money on crypto, but I did learn a lot about how the NFT world worked and how art worked and how some people would buy a ton of stuff for just almost absurd amounts of money, which let me understand a bit more about value when buying things and flipping things. So that was a good lesson. And then as that bubble bursted, I'd left that. But then from there, I had a bit of savings from that because if you make a couple thousand, rent here in Asia is like depends how luxurious you want to go, right? Because you could spend 300 and have a pretty alright place, or you could spend $1,000 and be right next to the ocean in Bali. At that time, during quarantine or COVID time in Bali, you can get a villa for like $500. These days, those are like 1,000 plus. So at that time, I got a beachfront Bingin Beach studio. So it was just a bed and a restroom, shower. It was enough for me. I was just traveling, and I still wasn't sure what I was doing. I just wanted to see Asia. I just wanted to surf, and I just wanted to be somewhere new. And so I stayed there for a month, and then I also stayed at another place these were my first two spots that I stayed at. So the other place was Blue Point, which if you've been to Bali, it's single fin attached. That single fin, that infinity pool everybody posts pictures at. At that pool, there's a resort attached to it, which I think this resort's glory days were in the 2000s because when I was there, it needed some maintenance. But that was just coming out of COVID, so maybe by now it's renovated and made a lot better. I haven't been back to that place. So at that time, you could get places for pretty cheap, and you could still get decent quality places in Asia for a good amount of money based on where I came from, like the U.S., right? I was paying 800 to 1,000 something in Hawaii, and San Diego is very similar as well. So with the crypto money and with the little that I saved from the U.S. that I came over here with, I started to explore a lot of the places and realized that, hey, if I were to stay in places for a month at a time, it's a lot cheaper. So I would stay a month at a time at different cities that I go to. So from there, it led me to more of Bali and then more of Vietnam. So I would shuffle between the two. And then during that time, I was also exploring how to make some more money online because my friend was making courses and he was making a good amount of money on courses. So I started making courses too. But the thing with courses is that it's not easy when you start out. And I was lucky enough to have a video editing background. So I was able to edit and do these courses. And I spent like a year just hustling, filming every day, editing every day. I remember one time I had a whole course come out, or a class. it was like a 30-minute class, but you have to plan it out, you have to film it, you have to cut it, you have to set up the stage and scene and everything. And I finished all that. I edit it, and then as you're editing too, you got to make things look good. You got to have title cards, you have to have animations, you have to make the audio good. So I did all of that in one day, and I remember just the grind of making courses at the time. And as my crypto and my savings was starting to go down, by the 1 year mark, I was able to get these courses actually to $1,000 a month, like pretty stable. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I have this kind of leeway in which I'm saving money now. I have the savings from before, so I could have a good time and enjoy myself. And so I spent that time between Vietnam, Thailand, and I think I went back to Bali one more time, and then sprinkle a bit of Europe in there, Japan 2 times. But we'll get to that in a sec. So once I started making like $1,000 a month, which isn't a lot in the American scale of things, but in outside of the American scale, it's actually pretty decent. And then from that point, that's where things started picking up a bit more. And these classes were making me enough to live a pretty good life where I could eat out every day. I could have a decent looking place. Like for me at that time, coming from a 1950s like farmer, or was it, they call it plantation houses in Hawaii. I actually lived in Lahaina. The city burned down now, so the house that I lived in is burnt down, which has a lot of old memories there. I'm happy that my parents got to see it, and I'm happy that I built a lot of memories there. So that was beautiful and amazing. But now that only lives in my memory. So that's kind of like a reminder that things are not going to be forever. I was hoping I would go back and things would be the same, and that I would get to relive all these memories that I had of living in Lahaina back in my 20s. But unfortunately, it's burnt down. But anyways, when I got to Asia, I was starting to finally live in these nicer places. Like, for example, like look at this. This is pretty decent. If I were to get a house like this in San Diego now, it's probably like 2,000 or like 1,000 something if I were to share with a roommate. So I started living in these nicer places. I started filming more and started recording more. And then at the same time, I was hanging out with some of my friends from crypto who are also making videos online. And so that's basically all we did. Was every week we would hang out, we would sit, we would talk, and we would just make content. Of course, he was many steps ahead of me, but we would bounce around content. And then I remember the reason why some of my classes picked up was because AI had just came onto the scene, and my buddy was like, hey, people's channels are blowing up just from AI. And I was like, all right, well, I have all this knowledge that I had built up from making classes, so let's learn these AI tools and then make some classes about it. So I started learning this thing called Midjourney, which is an image generator for AI. It just happened to be the best one and the most popular one. So I made a class on that. That class got picked up, and that class got appreciated by like thousands of people. At one point, it was licensed to American Airlines, and it was flying all over the world. So I started building more of these AI classes, and then watched my income from the classes go up. And then as this income goes up, I was able to live a really free life that I never got to live before. Because coming from, if you had watched my videos from way back in the day, I was just freelancing, shooting photos and videos. And every month I was basically at $0. Every month I had to start over, I had to hustle, I had to find some gigs, and I had to flip surfboards, shoot photos, shoot videos, make ads, make designs. I was on everything, every platform. I was constantly networking. And this was the first time I got to be free. So I would start doing these very liberating things. Like to me, I thought was romanticized, like things I would romanticize about, such as waking up, going to the coffee shop, like one of those super aesthetic coffee shops, which is plenty in Vietnam. Because if you didn't know, Vietnam is the #2 biggest exporter of coffee in the world, which is crazy. I didn't know that. So I would go to these coffee shops. I remember this one specifically where I was living in Vietnam at the time, Thao Dien, which is where all the foreigners live in Saigon, which is Ho Chi Minh City, like the capital, or the biggest, most bustling city in Vietnam. There's two. There's Hanoi and there's Ho Chi Minh City. Ho Chi Minh City is the most bustling one. And so I stayed there. I stayed at the foreigner area, and I was making local friends. I was making foreign friends, And I had my friend from back home, a childhood friend that I was hanging out with a lot. And so I had this network of friends in Ho Chi Minh City. And so this kind of makes me think of another topic that I should bring up about traveling, in that as you're traveling, it does get lonely at times. Because if you're moving to different cities every month, you have to make friends and be proactive in making friends. So fortunately for me, when I first went to Bali, I had a friend already. And then from him, I met a lot of other friends as well. And then when I moved to other places, I always had friends lined up. And from those friends, something about being with friends and hanging out with their friends, with other people, it opens up a more social version of you. And I remember specifically thinking one time as I was in Tokyo just how lonely I was, because I woke up and I just had strong zeros and walked around and shopped, thrift shopping. And while it was pretty cool, I got to buy a lot of cool clothes and all that, and see cool sights. It would have been a lot better with a friend, which luckily I did go with a friend originally. Like the first 2 weeks were with friends, and then the last 2 weeks was more alone, and I was just moving around different places trying to find cheap housing, because Japan is expensive, right? Like for a hotel room, you're paying 75 plus. I remember like in Tokyo, I was paying, and this is sharing a room with my friend. There was two beds in the room. We were paying each $75. That was $150 a night, and the room was small. Like you could barely open your suitcase. That's how small it was. But yeah, so I was thinking how lonely I was in Tokyo, even though the sights were amazing, the food was amazing. Which, if you like Japanese food, right now the price for Japanese food compared to America is just insane. Like the you can get quality ramen for like $7, whereas in America it's like $20 plus tip, and then you're out like with the drink too. You're out like $25. So Japan was amazing for that. Shopping was really good for secondhand clothes as well, because there's like a bustling secondhand market where it's not just like old stuff that you see at Salvation Army. It's more of like designer stuff that people have this culture of buying designer clothes. They wear it and then they're like, hey, I don't like this anymore. So they sell it off to buy more designer clothes. So you can get some very high quality stuff. I got a North Face jacket with Gore-Tex Pro for like $70. Those were like a couple $100 brand new. And a Patagonia jacket for like 40, which was probably some of my favorite buys while I was there. And so what I want to get at is that as you're traveling, having friends beforehand or having friends with you, going to a place with you, is going to make that experience a lot better. And then with friends, you're potentially able to make more friends too, because you're in this elevated social level, right? So when you're more social, you'll be more comfortable with other people. And then when you're more comfortable with other people, they really know who you are. And then the next time you hang out with them, you don't have to be someone else, right? Like you're already comfortable. You've established this level of comfort. So everybody's comfortable. And so this is how you expand your friend circle. Now, since we just brushed about eating out, I also want to jump into that as well, because eating out every day is not going to be healthy. So after like 2 years, 3 years of eating out every day, because I lived in hotels and apartments with no kitchen. I only had a kitchen, I think, at 3 places. And it just made more sense to eat out, because the experience of eating out was so novel and these restaurants were so well done. Like you can go to this place in Ho Chi Minh City called Pizza for Peas, and it's probably one of the best pizzas that I've ever had. And same goes with like burgers. You can go to this place called Burger Bros in Da Nang, and it's also one of the best burgers I had. Oh, I just remembered in Chiang Mai there's this one called Rock Me Burger that is so good that is probably literally the best burger I have ever had. And it was like 10 USD. In the US, for a burger of that quality, would probably be $20. I'm not kidding. For a venue like that, how well it's designed, and I think 10 USD is with the drink too. So it just made more sense to eat out. But eating out is not going to be healthy for you, and you feel it in the long run. So I'm feeling my body not be as fresh and strong as it was when I was making food for myself every day in Hawaii. And partially because I was always active as well. I was surfing like every day there was swell. You bet I was out there surfing. So those two things really contributed to my body's decline, which what I want to get at here is that if you're constantly travel, make sure that you stay active and make sure that you have your nutrition and diet in check. Because if you're constantly eating out, it's not going to be the best for you, because you are what you eat. And these restaurants aren't using the best ingredients. Now, of course, you may be able to find some healthy restaurants and make that your habit, like a ritual that you always go to this restaurant. But it is still going to be better if you cook your own food. Because if you make your own food, you're gonna know exactly what's in there, and it's just better overall. Like, you can control how healthy it is. Now, the last thing I want to touch on too is dating. Dating when you're traveling is very interesting, right? Because you're always moving places. And how do you manage this? Like, do you just date someone for a few months and then just like end it, which is kind of tough in itself, right? Or do you do a long distance relationship, which is also really tough? And I found that the more meaningful type of dating is when you're right next to them and you're able to hang out like almost on a daily basis and just have this like proximity to each other. And so I found that dating for me was suffering a bit because on one hand, I still want to be able to travel and be free and to just pack my bags and go anywhere I want. But then at the same time, building a meaningful relationship, because a meaningful relationship takes time, takes responsibility, and you have to be present for them. You can't just promise somebody something and then just go off and just break your promise. Because I know some people do it, but personally, I think that's unethical. But still, there is some beauty from that. And the beauty is if you're able to just fully love somebody and care for somebody, even though you have a short amount of time together, you can make that into a beautiful and magical experience and moment for both of you, because maybe this is just one chapter in each other's life book, and life takes us all in different directions, and this chapter could be a memorable, good chapter. At least that's how I want to think of it, and that's the outlook that I go into it with. And of course, chapters can continue back in the future. So I watched this movie called Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Sundown. I think that was the third one. And without putting in any spoilers, there were a lot of moments where these two people reconnected. And so I think that like these relationships, if you go into it with a mindset that you're going to put the most into it while you have proximity with each other, you can make the best of that relationship and see where it goes from there. Now, if I were to summarize all of this and to share like with somebody if they want to do something like this, to travel every month, to see new places, which for me, I really enjoyed seeing different aesthetics, different designs, different lifestyles, different cultures. And for me, being in Asia for the first time was very amazing. Having a remote job would be the best, but the second best thing would be having some sort of income online. And for me, it was these classes. I've met other people that have certain SaaS business, which is like a software as a service. I know some other people who are working for like a family business. Maybe they're doing some social media stuff for their family business, and they're not making like crazy amounts of money, but they're making enough money to travel in these places, because compared to the US, like most of the world doesn't make as much money as the US. And I'm sure this disparity is not going to last long because of seeing the rate of growth in all of these countries, like how Vietnam is growing at 6% a year, compared to the national GDP growth of all the other countries, which is at 3%. Eventually, all of these things are going to be equalized, and there's not going to be this economic inequality. So if you're in America or in a Western country that gets you paid an amount that is more than livable in a country like Vietnam, Thailand, or Bali, and also there's a lot of other countries like this as well, to take a look at the cost of living. See if you can afford to live there with the income that you're making, preferably having a bit to save up, and then you can bounce between these countries. For example, if you don't look into it, you really won't know how much it costs. For me, I didn't know Japan was decently affordable, because when I was living in San Diego, I was thinking Japan would be extremely expensive, like New York City or something. Given I live in a pretty humble place and I'm not like overspending on like the most high quality, or not quality, but the most designed boutique luxury stay, because that can rack up very expensively. But if I were to live a normal life in a suitable studio that has most of the creature comforts that I need, or all of the ones that I need, basically AC, a comfortable bed, then I could live there at the same price as what it costs to live in San Diego or Hawaii. So with that knowledge and going there and seeing it myself, you get to see this culture, you get to see the possibility that you can live in this place, and you get to experience this life that is so much more different and novel than the life that you had lived previously before. And for me, the most two important things is to consider if you can pay for housing and if you can pay for food. If you can pay for those two things, then you can live in a place because you don't need all the other stuff. Of course, it's nice to have extra for medical and whatnot. So that is in your savings. But other things like shopping and like buying a ton of gifts and all that for yourself or for others, that is more of a luxury. So if you want to travel and your sole goal is to travel, some things you might have to put aside, such as those. But if your sole goal really is to travel, you can do it based on what I just laid out. But yeah, I've been rambling a bit on this one. So if you want to leave a comment or have any suggestions that you want to know or learn more about, I'm happy to share. Leave a comment and see you in the next video, whenever that is.